In February of 1889, Eliza Ward was turned away from the only hotel in Dry Creek because her purse held 43 cents. Mrs. Pomeroy counted the coins twice beneath the front desk lamp, as though a second inspection might cause them to multiply. Then she pushed them back across the polished wood with 2 fingers. "That will not cover a night," she said. Eliza gathered the coins into her gloved hand. "I understand. It will not cover supper either." "I said I understand." The older woman looked at the snow pressing white against the hotel windows. Her face softened for one moment, but she still shook her head. Dry Creek was a mining town where charity was generally discussed at church and avoided in business. "You might try the freight shed," Mrs. Pomeroy offered. "There are men there tonight." Eliza met her eyes. "No, thank you." She had learned that a woman alone could survive cold, hunger, and even a false accusation. What she could not always survive was the sort of help that came with an unspoken price. She stepped back into the storm. The wind caught her skirt at once and snapped it against her boots. Snow swept through the street in long, hard ribbons, swallowing the hitching posts, the blacksmith shop, and the yellow glow of the hotel behind her. Eliza held her small leather valise close beneath one arm. Its handle had split 3 miles earlier, and she had tied it together with a strip of faded blue ribbon from her mother's sewing box. Inside were 2 dresses, a comb, the last letter her father had written before his death, and the letter that had ruined her chances of finding work anywhere nearby. Dismissed for dishonesty. Mrs. Harrow had said Eliza stole a pearl brooch. Eliza had not touched the brooch. She had seen the mistress's nephew pocket it during a family supper, but a housekeeper with no family name and no witness was easy to blame. By dawn, she had been put out with her wages withheld and her reputation tied neatly to a lie. Now the last stagecoach had gone east without her because she could not afford the fare. Eliza walked beyond Dry Creek's final buildings, though she had no real destination. She told herself she was following the county road. Soon the road became 2 pale ruts beneath the snow. Then even those disappeared. An hour passed. Her feet began to ache, then burn, then vanish from her awareness altogether. The wind stripped breath from her lungs. She tried to count steps, 100, then another 100, but the numbers scattered as quickly as the snow. When she saw the faint glow below the ridge, she thought at first it was moonlight caught in ice. Then she heard a horse. A dark shape moved behind a fence line, followed by the creak of a barn door. There was a cabin beyond it, low-roofed, weathered, stubbornly square against the weather. One window shone gold. Eliza stopped at the gate. She did not like asking strangers for anything. Her father had taught her how easily a favor could become a chain, but the storm had made the decision for her. Before she could lift the latch, the cabin door opened. A man stood there holding a lantern. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed for work rather than company. Wool shirt, heavy coat, gloves tucked into his belt. His hair was dark except for a single streak of silver near one temple. The lantern showed a scar at the edge of his jaw and eyes that were not unkind, though they had the guarded look of a man who had learned to keep kindness from becoming an invitation. He stared at her for one long second. "You're lost," he said. Eliza attempted a dignified answer. "I was trying to reach Red Hollow. That's 12 miles west." She blinked snow from her lashes. "Then I have made a mistake." "You've made several." His gaze fell to her thin coat and the torn valise. "Come inside before you make the last one." "I cannot impose. You're standing in a blizzard." I noticed. For the first time, something close to amusement moved across his face. It vanished before she could be certain she had seen it. "You can argue on the porch," he said, stepping aside. "Or you can come in where arguments are less likely to freeze." The cabin held one room, a stone hearth, a plain table, shelves of provisions, and the sharp, clean scent of pine smoke. It was orderly to the point of loneliness. No photographs. No extra chair drawn near the fire. Nothing left carelessly where another person might have touched it. The man set a kettle over the coals. "My name is Gideon Hale," he said. "Eliza Ward." He nodded once, as if filing it away with a fact he might need later. "You may take the bed. I'll sleep near the fire." "I cannot take your bed." "You can, because I've slept on the floor before, and you look like you may not make it through the night otherwise." There was no softness in the words, but no expectation attached to them either. That mattered more than softness. Eliza removed her gloves. Her hands shook despite her efforts. Gideon noticed. He poured hot water into a chipped blue enamel cup and added a pinch of dried mint. "You have food?" he asked. "Not much." That was not the question. She looked up. "I asked whether you have eaten." Her throat tightened unexpectedly. "Not since morning." He nodded and lifted the lid from an iron pot simmering beside the fire. "Then you'll eat." Outside, the wind battered the cabin walls. Inside, Eliza held the blue cup between both hands, watched the stranger move with quiet certainty around his hearth, and wondered why a man who lived as though the world had disappointed him would open his door to someone who had been disappointed by it too. Eliza woke before dawn to the sound of iron striking wood. For one confused moment, she did not know where she was. Then she saw the stone hearth, the shelves arranged with military precision, and Gideon Hale's folded coat beneath her head. At some point during the night, he must have placed it there without waking her. The bed was warm. The cabin was not. The fire had burned low, and Gideon was nowhere inside. Through the frosted window, she could make out his broad shape near the woodshed. He was splitting logs while snow collected across his shoulders. Eliza left the bed and found her boots drying beside the hearth. A pair of thick wool socks had been placed beside them. They were far too large for her. She put them on anyway. By the time Gideon returned, carrying enough wood to last several hours, the fire was burning brightly and 2 blue enamel cups sat on the table. Eliza had found coffee, flour, salt, and a jar containing the last spoonful of molasses. She had also discovered that Gideon's kitchen stores were orderly only from a distance. "You have 6 sacks of beans," she said as he closed the door against the wind, "but barely enough flour for 10 days. He set down the firewood. "Good morning to you too. You also have 3 open containers of coffee. I know where they are." One was behind a horseshoe. "It's a useful horseshoe." She looked at him, uncertain whether he was joking. His expression offered no assistance. "I made biscuits," she said. Gideon's gaze moved to the iron pan beside the fire. "With my last molasses?" "With half of your last molasses." "That is reassuring. You brought an unconscious woman into your cabin last night. I assumed you were capable of surviving a minor reduction in molasses." The corner of his mouth moved. It was not quite a smile, but it was closer than anything she had seen the previous evening. They ate at the table, while the storm covered the world beyond the window. Gideon did not ask about the dismissal letter in her valise. Eliza appreciated his restraint, though part of her wondered whether it came from courtesy or indifference. After breakfast, he put on his coat. "Where are you going?" "Barn." "In this weather?" "The cattle haven't learned to feed themselves." "I can help." "No." Eliza raised her eyes. Gideon paused with one glove halfway onto his hand. "The snow is deep, the path is iced over, and you nearly froze last night." "I have recovered." "You have been awake for 20 minutes. 27. He studied her face as though searching for the safest response. "Stay inside, Miss Ward." There was no threat in his voice, but there was an assumption. Eliza had spent too many years living beneath other people's assumptions. "I will not interfere with your work," she said, "but I will decide whether I am capable of walking to a barn." Something changed in Gideon's expression. He removed the second glove from his hand and placed it on the table. "You're right," he said. The answer came so quickly that Eliza almost failed to understand it. "My concern is reasonable," he continued, "but the choice is yours. If you come, wear my spare coat and step where I step. There is ice beneath the eastern drift." No man had ever surrendered authority to her so plainly. Most apologized by explaining why they had been correct all along. Gideon simply opened the door and waited. The barn stood 40 yards from the cabin, but the storm made it feel like half a mile. Eliza followed in Gideon's tracks, gripping the rope he had stretched between the 2 buildings. Inside, 12 cattle shifted in their stalls, their breath rising in pale clouds. 2 horses watched from adjoining pens. Gideon moved among them with quiet familiarity, checking water buckets and running his hands along legs and bellies. Eliza carried hay where he directed and broke the ice forming over a trough. Then she heard an irregular scraping from the final stall. A red heifer lay on her side, straining. "How long has she been like that?" Eliza asked. Gideon crouched beside the animal. "She wasn't laboring an hour ago." He examined her and swore beneath his breath. "What is it?" "Calf is turned wrong. Can you correct it?" "If I can reach the forelegs, she's frightened." Eliza entered the stall before he could answer. "Stay near her head," Gideon said, "and move if she tries to rise." Eliza knelt in the straw and placed one hand against the heifer's neck. The animal's eye rolled toward her, wide and shining. "My father kept dairy cows," she said. "I have seen this before. You said nothing about a farm. You did not ask." She began humming. It was an old melody her mother had sung while sewing, low and repetitive, without words. The heifer's breathing remained labored, but her head gradually settled against the straw. Gideon worked carefully. Minutes passed. His shoulders tightened with effort. "I have one leg," he said. "I need the other." The heifer struggled. Eliza kept her hand against its neck and continued the melody even when fear sharpened her voice. Then Gideon leaned back. "Now." Together they pulled. The calf emerged in a rush of fluid and straw, small, wet, and terrifyingly still. Gideon cleared its mouth and rubbed its chest with a feed sack. Nothing happened. Eliza seized a handful of clean straw and began rubbing the calf's sides. "Come on," she whispered. "You did not make us work this hard for nothing." Gideon looked at her once, then returned to the calf. A moment later, the tiny body jerked. It coughed, drew a thin breath, and let out an indignant cry. Eliza laughed. The sound escaped before she could stop it. Gideon sat back on his heels, his sleeves wet to the elbows, and stared at her. Not at the calf, but at her. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. You were staring." I was surprised. That the calf lived? That you laughed? The answer made her suddenly aware of how close they were, kneeling together in the straw. Gideon looked away first and began tending the exhausted mother. They remained in the barn until the calf stood on uncertain legs and found its mother. On their way back to the cabin, Gideon walked more slowly so Eliza would not have to struggle through his longer tracks. Inside, he poured coffee into the 2 blue cups. "You were useful today," he said. Eliza warmed her hands around hers. That almost sounded like praise. It was praise. "You should practice. People might recognize it more easily." This time Gideon did smile. It changed his entire face, but it vanished almost immediately, as though he had remembered he was not supposed to possess it. Later, while he returned to the barn, Eliza began repairing the torn handle of her valise. The faded blue ribbon had stretched nearly beyond use. She untied it and laid it beside her cup. Beneath the valise, she noticed a loose floorboard. One corner of a folded paper protruded through the gap. Eliza bent and pulled it free, intending only to place it somewhere safe. Then she saw the official seal, the boundary figures, and Gideon Hale's name written beneath a demand for payment. The notice was 3 weeks old. Unless Gideon produced $800 or proved that the northern pasture legally belonged to him, the Dry Creek Land Company would seize nearly half his ranch before the spring thaw. Gideon returned near dusk, with snow crusted across his coat and a fresh cut above one eyebrow. Eliza was standing beside the table with the payment notice open before her. He saw the paper immediately. The quiet in the cabin changed. "Where did you find that?" he asked. "It was beneath a loose floorboard." "And you read it?" "I saw your name and an official seal. I thought it might be important. It was under the floor for a reason." Eliza held his gaze. "Then you need a better hiding place." Gideon removed his coat slowly and hung it beside the door. He crossed the room, picked up the notice, and folded it along its existing creases. "You had no right." "No," she said, "I did not." Her agreement seemed to unsettle him more than an argument would have. "I should not have read it," she continued. "But now that I have, I know the Dry Creek Land Company intends to take 160 acres from you. That is my concern. The notice says you accepted an $800 advance and pledged the northern pasture as security. I know what it says." "Did you?" His eyes hardened. "Did I what?" "Accept the money." Gideon placed both hands on the table. "Miss Ward, a night beneath my roof does not make you my attorney. No, but it does not make me foolish either." The fire snapped between them. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Gideon took the blue enamel cup from the shelf and poured himself coffee. He drank it standing, his back partly turned to her. "I borrowed $400 18 months ago," he said at last. "A late freeze killed most of my calves. I needed breeding stock before the next season." "From the Dry Creek Land Company?" "From Amos Bell, their former manager. The agreement allowed me 3 years to repay it at 6%. "And how much have you paid?" $270. "Do you have receipts?" His silence answered first. "Some," he said. "Some?" Bell recorded each payment in a ledger. He gave me receipts when he remembered. Eliza closed her eyes briefly. "That was unwise," she said. "I was aware of that before you said it." "Then why did you continue paying him without proof?" "Because Amos Bell was my friend." "Was?" "He died in October. His nephew, Silas Bell, took over the company 3 weeks later." Eliza looked at the notice again. Silas Bell's signature appeared at the bottom, black and elaborate. "And now the nephew claims you borrowed twice the amount under different terms." Gideon nodded. "Have you seen the agreement he relies upon?" "He showed me a copy. My signature is on it." "Is it your signature?" "It looks like mine." "That is not the same answer." A muscle tightened in Gideon's jaw. "I signed several documents when I took the loan. Bell said one was the note, one recorded the cattle as security, and another was for county filing." "Did you read them?" "I read what I could." Eliza heard the shame beneath his irritation and softened her voice. "Mr. Hale, not understanding a legal document does not make a man dishonest." "No, it only makes him easy to rob." She said nothing to that. Gideon walked to the window. Outside, the storm had weakened, but snow had climbed halfway up the fence posts. Beyond them, the northern pasture lay invisible beneath the night. "That land has water," he said, "a spring that runs even in August. Without it, I can't keep more than half the herd through a dry summer." "Then, that is what Silas Bell truly wants. He wants the spring and the wagon access running along the northern boundary. The company has been buying property west of Dry Creek for a year." "What is west of Dry Creek?" "Coal, according to the surveyors." Now the demand made sense. The debt was merely the instrument. The land was the prize. Eliza sat at the table and drew the oil lamp closer. "Show me every paper you have." Gideon turned from the window. "You just admitted you had no right to read the first one." "I did. Now I am asking permission to read the rest." "And what makes you qualified?" "Mrs. Harrow trusted me with her household accounts for 4 years. Before that, I kept the books at my father's dairy farm. I can calculate interest, recognize altered totals, and distinguish a payment record from an excuse." "That does not make you a lawyer." "No. It makes me more useful than the loose floorboard." His eyes rested on her for a long moment. Then he crossed to a wooden chest at the foot of the bed. From beneath a folded blanket, he removed a narrow iron box. He carried it to the table, but kept one hand on the lid. "If I let you see these," he said, "you say nothing about them in town." "I have no one in town to tell." "That is not a promise." Eliza looked directly at him. "I promise." Gideon opened the box. Inside were land deeds, tax records, livestock bills, 6 receipts from Amos Bell, and letters bound with a leather cord. Eliza separated the business papers without touching the letters. She worked for nearly 2 hours. Gideon sat across from her, repairing a broken bridle. At first he watched every document she lifted. Gradually, his attention shifted to the leather in his hands. Eliza arranged the receipts chronologically. Each carried Amos Bell's initials and the Dry Creek Land Company stamp. $20, $50, $40, $35, $75, $50, $270 exactly. Then she found the county filing receipt. "Here," she said. Gideon set down the bridle. The receipt identified his loan as $400. More importantly, the clerk had recorded the secured property as 40 head of cattle, not the northern pasture. Gideon read the line twice. "That proves Bell's notice is false," he said. "It proves the agreement filed with the county 18 months ago differed from the one Silas showed you." "Isn't that enough?" "Not if the original filing has disappeared." His expression told her that possibility had already occurred to him. Eliza examined the 6 payment receipts again. 5 had been written in black ink. The last, dated September, was written in blue. At its bottom, Amos Bell had added 4 words in cramped handwriting. Balance entered in red book. "What red book?" she asked. Gideon leaned closer. His shoulder nearly touched hers. "I don't know." "Did Amos keep more than one ledger?" "He kept the company accounts in a large black volume. I saw him write my payments there." "Then this must be something else." "He died in his office. Silas cleared the place out before the funeral." Eliza tapped the receipt lightly. "If Amos entered your remaining balance in another ledger, that book could show the true loan. If it still exists. If Silas destroyed it, we will prove the agreement another way." Gideon studied her. "You say that as though this has become your fight." Eliza's fingers went still. She remembered the pearl brooch, Mrs. Harrow's nephew, and the dismissal letter in her valise. She remembered standing silently while a lie became truth merely because the liar possessed more power. "No," she said quietly, "but I know what it is to lose something because another person controls the record." Gideon's gaze shifted toward her valise. "The letter you carry," he said. "It calls you dishonest." "Yes." "Are you?" She met his eyes. "No." He nodded once. "Then I believe you." There was no interrogation and no demand for proof. Just 4 plain words, offered by a man who did not waste them. Eliza looked down before he could see how deeply they had landed. A heavy impact suddenly shook the cabin. Both of them rose. Gideon took the lantern and opened the door. Wind drove snow across the porch, but the worst of the storm had passed. Far below the ridge came the unmistakable roar of moving water. He listened, then swore. "What happened?" Eliza asked. "The ice dam broke upstream." They walked as far as the fence, where the lantern revealed dark water surging through the creek channel. Something large struck the wooden bridge and tore away part of its railing. By morning, the center span was gone. Gideon stood at the bank, studying the broken timbers. "The road to Dry Creek runs across that bridge," Eliza said. "Yes." "How long before it can be repaired?" "With the ground frozen and the creek this high." He looked toward the distant mountains. 3 weeks. Perhaps 4. Eliza glanced back at the cabin. Smoke rose from its chimney into the pale morning sky. "I can pay for my food with work," she said. Gideon faced her. "You do not owe me for surviving a storm." "Then pay me wages." "I will organize your accounts, prepare a written challenge to Silas Bell's claim, and keep your household while you repair the bridge." "You intend to remain here?" "Until the road opens." He considered her offer with the seriousness of a man evaluating a land purchase. "You take the bed," he said. "I keep sleeping by the fire. You decide which work you accept. Either of us can end the arrangement at any time." "And the wages?" $1 a week, plus food. $1.25. $1. You have 3 open containers of coffee and no accurate supply list. $1.10. Eliza extended her hand. "Agreed." Gideon looked at it before taking it. His palm was rough and warm. The handshake lasted no longer than necessary, but when it ended, both of them became oddly interested in the ruined bridge. Back inside, Gideon poured coffee into their 2 blue cups. Until that morning, one had always remained at the back of the shelf, clean and unused. This time, when Eliza finished drinking, Gideon washed both cups and placed them side by side. During the next 2 weeks, Eliza learned that Gideon Hale possessed 2 very different kinds of silence. The first was the silence he wore around strangers, a closed door, firm and deliberate. The second belonged to work. It was not empty at all. It contained the scrape of her pencil across paper, the steady pull of his whetstone along a blade, the simmering of beans, and the sound of 2 blue cups being set upon the table each morning. They developed a routine without discussing it. Gideon rose before sunrise to tend the cattle. Eliza prepared breakfast, reviewed the accounts, and made lists of every receipt, purchase, and livestock sale recorded during the past 3 years. Afterward, they worked together on the damaged bridge. Gideon showed her how to judge timber by its grain, how to bind a temporary support with wet rawhide, and how to drive a spike without wasting strength. "You are fighting the hammer," he told her on the first afternoon. "It has been uncooperative. It is an object. That explains its limited imagination." He took the hammer from her and demonstrated the motion. "Let the weight do the work." When he returned it, Eliza copied him. The spike sank cleanly into the timber. Gideon nodded. "Was that praise?" she asked. It was a nod. "You remain a difficult employer. You negotiated the wages." The bridge repair progressed slowly. The water remained high, and Gideon refused to let Eliza work above the central channel until he secured a rope between the banks. She accepted the restriction because he explained the danger rather than issuing an order. That distinction mattered to her. Gideon seemed to understand that it did. In return, she taught him how to maintain his accounts. His old system consisted of storing bills in 3 different boxes and remembering the rest. Gideon claimed his memory was reliable. Eliza observed that this was a remarkable quality for a man who had forgotten purchasing 12 sacks of oats. "I did not forget them. You paid for 12. Only 10 arrived." Gideon frowned at the invoice. Eliza placed another paper beside it. "The delivery receipt confirms 10. Bell's company supplied those oats." "Yes." He sat down. They reviewed every transaction involving the Dry Creek Land Company. Missing sacks, altered totals, duplicate charges, and unexplained fees appeared throughout the records. Individually, each discrepancy was small enough to dismiss. Together, they formed a pattern. $37.60, Eliza said. "That is how much they took from you before presenting the false loan." Gideon looked at the figures. "Can you prove it?" "I already have." She showed him the matching invoices and receipts, each pair marked in her neat handwriting. He studied the pages, then looked at her with the same expression he had worn in the barn after the calf survived. "You make disorder look ashamed of itself," he said. Eliza tried not to smile. That was considerably better than a nod. That evening, Gideon prepared supper while she copied the evidence into a clean ledger. He cooked venison with potatoes and wild onions, working with more competence than elegance. When he placed a plate before her, she noticed he had given her the larger portion. She quietly exchanged the plates while his back was turned. He noticed immediately and exchanged them again. "You worked in the creek all day," she said. "You have not stopped writing since noon. Writing requires less food than lifting timber. Then consider it compensation for making my disorder ashamed." Eliza left the plates where they were. After supper, the wind rose again. It was gentler than the blizzard, but it moved through the pines with a low, restless sound. Gideon sat near the fire, repairing a harness. Eliza continued working at the table. A small wooden box rested beside his chair. Its lid bore the faded image of a painted bird. "You look at that box every evening," Eliza said. His hands stopped. "I should not have asked." "No." Gideon set down the harness. "You should know if you are going to remain here." He lifted the box and placed it on the table between them. Inside lay several carved wooden animals, a horse, a bear, and a calf no larger than Eliza's thumb. "My younger sister made them," he said. Her name was Ruth. Eliza waited. "Our parents died during a fever outbreak. I was 22. Ruth was 13, so I raised her here." "What happened to her?" "She married a merchant from Helena when she was 19. He promised her a house, an education, and a life that did not smell like cattle." There was no bitterness in Gideon's voice, only old regret. "You did not approve?" "I told her he was unreliable. She told me I mistook control for protection." "Was she right?" Gideon looked into the fire. "Partly." The answer carried more honesty than self-forgiveness. "She left 8 years ago. We exchanged 2 letters. Then none." "Have you written to her?" "Many times." "Did you send them?" "No." Eliza looked at the small wooden horse. Its legs were uneven, but someone had polished it carefully for years. "Why?" "Because every letter sounded like an explanation of why I had been right." "Were you?" "No." The word came quietly. Eliza understood then that Gideon had not chosen loneliness because he preferred it. He had simply repeated it for so long that admitting the mistake seemed more frightening than continuing to live inside it. She reached for the small horse, but stopped before touching it. "May I?" He nodded. One leg had split along the grain. Eliza examined it, then took the faded blue ribbon from beside her valise. She cut a narrow strip, applied a little glue from Gideon's repair kit, and bound the damaged leg. "There," she said. "It will hold once it dries." Gideon watched her return the horse to the box. "That ribbon held your valise together," he said. "It has performed more important work now." He closed the lid carefully. The following afternoon, a rider appeared on the northern trail. Gideon saw him first. He was working near the bridge when he straightened and placed one hand above his eyes. "Someone is coming." The rider wore an expensive black coat and guided a gray gelding down the snowy slope. He did not approach like a neighbor. He approached like a man inspecting property he expected to own. Gideon's face became unreadable. "Silas Bell," he said. Silas dismounted near the cabin. He was younger than Eliza expected, perhaps 30, with pale gloves and a carefully trimmed mustache. His boots carried less mud than any boots had a right to carry in February. "Hail," he said. "I heard the bridge was gone." "You heard correctly. I came by the northern ford. That crosses my pasture. For now." Silas smiled as though he had offered a harmless joke. Then he noticed Eliza. "And who is this?" "Eliza Ward," she said before Gideon could answer. "Mr. Hale's bookkeeper." Silas's eyes moved from her face to the ledger beneath her arm. "Bookkeeper?" "She is reviewing the company's claim," Gideon said. For the first time, Silas's smile lost its ease. "That is unnecessary. The signed agreement is plain." "Then you will have no objection to providing the original," Eliza said. "I showed Mr. Hale a certified copy. A copy prepared in your office." Silas removed one glove finger by finger. "Miss Ward, business between landowners is rarely improved by the interference of stranded women." Gideon stepped forward. Eliza spoke before he could. "And false accounts are rarely improved by someone who knows arithmetic." Silas's gaze sharpened. He reached inside his coat and produced another notice. "The company will take possession of the northern pasture on March 1st unless the full balance is paid. That includes the spring, the access road, and every structure standing upon the disputed acreage." He held the paper out. Gideon did not take it. Eliza did. The company seal had been pressed into red wax at the bottom. She studied its image, a mountain, a pickaxe, and 3 small stars. Something about it troubled her. Silas replaced his glove. "I suggest you spend the remaining days deciding which cattle to sell." He mounted and rode back toward the northern trail. Gideon watched until he disappeared behind the ridge. "He is afraid," Eliza said. He did not look afraid. "He rode through an unsafe ford in winter, merely to learn what we know." She examined the seal again. Then she hurried inside and opened Gideon's iron box. The 6 receipts from Amos Bell each bore the Dry Creek Land Company's stamp. A mountain, a pickaxe, and 2 stars. Eliza placed the new notice beside them. "Silas changed the company seal after his uncle's death," Gideon said. "Yes." "So?" She turned over the copy of the loan agreement Silas had given him 3 weeks earlier. At the bottom was the same 3-star seal. But the document claimed it had been certified 6 months before Amos Bell died, when the company was still using 2 stars. Gideon stared at it. "The certification is false," Eliza said, "and Silas just delivered the proof himself." By the final week of February, the bridge could carry a wagon again. Gideon tested it first with an empty cart, then with 2 sacks of grain, and finally with half a ton of timber. Eliza stood on the bank during each crossing, arms folded against the cold. "If it collapses now," he called, "you may tell me you were right. I have not said it will collapse. You have been looking at it as though you expect it to confess. I look at all questionable structures that way." Gideon guided the wagon safely to the opposite bank. "The bridge is sound, Miss Ward." "So you claim." But she smiled as she said it, and he smiled back. Their arrangement was supposed to end when the bridge reopened. Neither of them mentioned that fact until the following morning. Eliza packed her dresses into the repaired valise. Gideon stood near the table, turning the blue cup in his hands. "I will take you to Dry Creek," he said. "The county clerk's office opens at 9. "Thank you. You can stay at Pomeroy's hotel while we investigate the filing." "With what money?" "I owe you 2 weeks' wages. $2.20 will not last long." "Then you may continue as my bookkeeper." Eliza stopped folding her coat. Until the hearing, Gideon added. After that, you can decide what you want. It was a practical offer, delivered in a practical voice. Yet he had polished the harness on the smaller mare for her and packed enough food for 2 people. I accept, she said. Something eased in his shoulders. Before they left, Gideon opened the iron box and removed his original deed, the 6 receipts, the county filing slip, and Silas's disputed agreement. He wrapped them in oilcloth and held the bundle out to her. You should carry these. Eliza did not take it immediately. Why me? Because if Silas stops us, he will search my saddlebags first. That is not the whole reason. No. Gideon looked down at the papers. I have protected this ranch alone for 8 years, he said. It has not gone especially well. Then he placed the bundle in her hands. The weight was not great, but Eliza understood what he had given her. The deed represented his land. The receipts represented his defense. Together, they represented the future he had refused to trust to anyone else. She secured the bundle inside her valise, beneath her mother's sewing box. I will keep it safe. I know. They reached Dry Creek shortly before noon. Meltwater ran along both sides of the main street, turning the snow gray beneath wagon wheels. Men stopped outside the blacksmith shop to watch them pass. A woman emerged from the general store and stared openly at Eliza riding beside Gideon. By the time they tied the horses outside the courthouse, the town had probably invented an engagement, a scandal, and 2 children. The county clerk's office occupied a narrow room behind the sheriff's desk. Its shelves sagged beneath deed books, tax rolls, mining claims, and marriage records. The clerk, Miriam Cobb, was a woman of perhaps 50, with iron-gray hair and spectacles suspended from a silver chain. She listened without interruption as Eliza explained the contradictory loan documents. When Eliza showed her the 2 company seals, Mrs. Cobb's expression sharpened. That is not proof of forgery by itself, she said. No, Eliza replied, but it proves this certification could not have been made on the date written upon it. Mrs. Cobb glanced at Gideon. Where did you find her? In a blizzard. That seems an inefficient method of hiring a bookkeeper. It was. Mrs. Cobb unlocked a cabinet and removed the county's filing index. Her finger traveled down a column of entries until it reached Gideon's name. Hail, Gideon. Chattel Mortgage. $400. 40 head of cattle pledged. Gideon leaned over the desk. Then the county record agrees with my receipt. The index does. Mrs. Cobb opened the corresponding volume. 2 pages had been cut from the book. The room became very quiet. Who has access to this cabinet? Gideon asked. 3 people, myself, Deputy Rusk, and County Commissioner Vale. Vale owns shares in Bell's company, Gideon said. I am aware of that. Then why would you give him access? Mrs. Cobb closed the book with more force than necessary. Because territorial law gives a county commissioner authority to inspect public records. My personal opinion of the law does not alter it. Can you testify that the pages were here before Silas took control? I can testify that I entered the filing myself. She tapped the index. But an index entry may be challenged as clerical error if the original instrument is missing. Eliza examined the cut edge. The paper had not been torn. Someone had used a sharp blade carefully, close to the binding. Would another copy exist? She asked. Possibly. For secured loans involving registered livestock, we send quarterly summaries to the territorial recorder in Helena. When was the last shipment? December. After Amos Bell died. Several weeks after. Who prepared it? Mrs. Cobb looked toward the closed door. Commissioner Vale collected the December records himself. Another path controlled by Silas. Gideon exhaled slowly. What about the red book? Mrs. Cobb's eyes shifted back to him. What red book? Eliza showed her the final receipt bearing Amos's note. For the first time, the clerk appeared surprised. Amos kept a private reconciliation ledger, she said. He brought it here every quarter to compare his accounts against our filings. It was bound in red leather. Did Silas inherit it? Eliza asked. He should have. He claims all of his uncle's old records were destroyed because of water damage. Mrs. Cobb gave a humorless laugh. There was no water damage at that office. Who else saw the ledger? Amos's assistant, a young man named Owen Price. Where is he? Silas dismissed him the day after the funeral. Owen went to work at the Crescent Mine, 12 miles north. Gideon looked at Eliza. They finally had a witness who might know where the red ledger had gone. A shadow crossed the frosted glass in the office door. Silas Bell entered without knocking. Commissioner Vale followed him. Vale was a heavy man with a gold watch chain and the slow confidence of someone accustomed to having his decisions accepted before he made them. "I was told Mr. Hale had come to dispute his debt," Vale said. "I came to examine the county record." Gideon replied, "A record that appears to be missing." "Yes." "Conveniently." Vale's face reddened. Silas remained composed. "I would be careful with accusations," Silas said, "especially when your companion has already admitted handling papers that do not belong to her." Eliza felt Gideon become still beside her. "What are you implying?" he asked. Silas looked at Eliza rather than answering him. "Mrs. Harrow sent a letter to Dry Creek yesterday. She is searching for a former housekeeper dismissed for stealing a pearl brooch." The old humiliation returned so quickly that Eliza almost tasted it. Mrs. Cobb lowered her spectacles. Commissioner Vale examined Eliza with immediate suspicion. Gideon did not look at her. He looked only at Silas. "I know about the accusation," he said. "Do you know she left the Harrow estate carrying stolen property?" "I know she says she did not." Silas smiled faintly. "And that is sufficient for you?" "Yes." The single word silenced the room. Silas's smile disappeared. Vale cleared his throat. "Regardless, Miss Ward has no legal standing in this matter." "She is my authorized bookkeeper," Gideon said. "Her standing comes from me." He reached into his coat, removed the key to his iron deed box, and placed it in Eliza's palm before them all. The act was small, almost ordinary, yet everyone in the room understood it. Gideon Hale had trusted an accused thief with everything required to save, or surrender, his land. "We are finished here," he said. Outside the courthouse, Eliza walked several steps before stopping. "You should not have done that." "Given you the key?" "Defended me without proof." Gideon turned toward her. "You defended my land before you had proof." "That is different." "Why?" "Because I knew what to look for." "So did I." The street moved around them. Wagon wheels, horses, boots striking wet boards. Gideon stood close enough to shield her from the eyes of the town, but he did not touch her. "What did you see?" she asked. "A woman who told me when she was wrong. A woman who stayed beside a frightened animal until it lived. A woman who could have ignored my debt and gone on her way." His voice softened. "And a woman who has not lied to me once." Eliza closed her fingers around the key. For years, people had trusted her only while she remained useful and obedient. Gideon's trust felt different. It did not ask her to become smaller in exchange for it. "We should find Owen Price," she said, because she did not yet know what else to say. Gideon nodded. "At first light." Across the street, Silas Bell watched them from the courthouse window, and when he saw the iron key in Eliza's hand, he understood precisely which person he would have to remove before Gideon Hale could be forced from his land. Gideon and Eliza left for the Crescent Mine before sunrise. The northern trail climbed through 12 miles of pine forest before descending into a narrow valley blackened by coal dust. Snow still covered the slopes, but around the mine entrance it had turned gray beneath the boots of 100 workers. Owen Price was unloading timber supports from a wagon. He was younger than Eliza expected, thin and sharp-featured, with a healing bruise beneath one eye. At the sight of Gideon, he immediately looked toward the mine office. "I cannot speak to you here," he said. "Then choose somewhere else," Gideon replied. Owen led them behind an abandoned assay shed beyond the workers' quarters. "If Bell learns I spoke with you, I lose my position. If you remain silent, he takes my ranch," Gideon said, "and if I lose my position, my mother and sisters do not eat." Eliza stepped between the two men before Gideon's anger closed the conversation. "We are not asking you to sacrifice your family," she said. "We need to know whether Amos Bell kept a red ledger." Owen's expression answered before he did. "He did." "What was recorded in it?" "Private loans, adjusted balances, and payments that had not yet been transferred to the company's main account." "Did it contain Gideon Hale's loan?" "Yes, $400, secured by 40 cattle." Gideon glanced at Eliza. "Where is the ledger now?" she asked. "Commissioner Vale has it." Owen lowered his voice. "Mr. Amos became suspicious last summer. Silas had begun preparing loan papers for ranchers who never requested them. He used signatures copied from cattle sale agreements and attached different security terms. Why did Amos not report him? Gideon asked. He intended to. 2 days before he died, he told me to take the red ledger to Mrs. Cobb if anything happened to him. And did you? I tried. Vale was waiting outside the office after the funeral. He said the ledger was company property and threatened to charge me with theft. So you surrendered it, Gideon said. Owen's shame was immediate. I was 19. Vale was a county commissioner, and Silas had already dismissed me. Eliza touched Gideon's sleeve lightly. His anger eased. You did what you thought would keep you safe, she told Owen. But you remembered what the ledger contained. Remembering will not satisfy a judge. No, but sworn testimony may help. Owen shook his head. I cannot testify. Do you have anything in Amos's handwriting? She asked. He looked toward the mine office again. Before updating the Red Book, Amos prepared monthly balance sheets. I copied them into the company ledger. What happened to the sheets? Silas burned most of them. Most? Owen hesitated. Then he entered the assay shed and pulled a loose plank from beneath an old workbench. From the narrow space behind it, he removed a folded sheet protected inside a tobacco tin. I kept the final one, he said. I thought it might protect me if Silas accused me of altering the accounts. Eliza unfolded it carefully. The page listed 7 private loans in Amos Bell's handwriting. Beside Gideon Hale's name were the same figures recorded on the receipts. Original principal, $400. Payments received, $270. Remaining principal and interest, $157.80. Security, 40 branded cattle. At the bottom, Amos had written another note. Discrepancies found in SB copies. Report to Territorial Examiner after quarter closes. This is why Silas moved so quickly after his uncle died, Eliza said. He knew an examination would expose him. Owen nodded. We need this page, Gideon said. No. Owen reached for it. If you take it and lose, I have nothing. Eliza returned the document to him. Keep the original. Allow me to make a copy, then sign it in front of Mrs. Cobb. She can certify that you produced the original. Owen stared at her. Would that protect me? It will establish that you cooperated with an official investigation. Silas may still dismiss you, but he will have greater difficulty accusing you of theft. I already expect to be dismissed. Then let Gideon hire you. Gideon turned toward her. Hire him to do what? You said you need a second ranch hand before calving season. I said I might. You also paid for 12 sacks of oats and received 10. Your judgment regarding employees appears more reliable than your judgment regarding suppliers. Owen almost smiled. Gideon considered him. Can you handle cattle? I grew up on a stock farm. Can you repair fence? Yes. Can you arrive before dawn without complaining? No, Owen said. But I can arrive before dawn. Gideon extended his hand. $22 a month and meals. Owen looked at the offered hand, then shook it. They rode back toward Dry Creek with the copied balance sheet protected inside Eliza's valise. The journey took longer than expected. Warm afternoon air loosened snow from the slopes, forcing them to lead the horses across 2 unstable sections of trail. They stopped at dusk beside a stand of cottonwoods. Gideon built a small fire while Eliza prepared coffee. They sat on opposite sides of the flames, sharing bread and dried meat. You offered Owen employment before asking me, Gideon said. I did. That was presumptuous. Was I wrong? No. Then I will apologize for the method. But not the result? Certainly not. He handed her one of the blue cups. Gideon had packed both without mentioning it. Eliza held hers near the fire. Why did you believe me in town? She asked. I told you. You told me what you had observed. That is not the same as believing someone against an accusation. Gideon looked into the flames. Ruth's husband wrote to me once after she left. He said she regretted marrying him and wanted money to return home. What did you do? I sent the money. Did she return? No. Years later, I learned he had written the letter himself. Ruth never saw it. Eliza understood. You were deceived by someone who claimed to speak for a woman you loved. Yes. Since then, I prefer to judge a person by what she does in front of me." The words settled into the space between them. "Mrs. Harrow's nephew stole the brooch," Eliza said. "I saw him place it in his pocket. Why did you not accuse him?" "I did. Mrs. Harrow said her nephew's name was worth more than mine." Gideon's expression hardened. She was wrong. She possessed the house, the money, and the authority to dismiss me. Being wrong did not prevent her from winning. For now. Eliza looked at him over the rim of her cup. No one had ever added those two words to her story. Later, when the temperature fell, Gideon gave her the bedroll and took only his coat for himself. Eliza divided the blankets and pushed half toward him. "I am not cold," he said. "Your teeth disagree. They are overly dramatic. Take the blanket." He did. They slept on opposite sides of the dying fire, the blue cups resting together on a flat stone between them. When Eliza woke before dawn, Gideon was already awake. He lay facing the fire, watching her with an expression so unguarded that neither of them spoke. Then he rose and began saddling the horses. They reached the ranch shortly after noon. The northern gate stood open. Gideon dismounted before his horse had fully stopped. Fresh wagon tracks crossed the pasture. Beyond the ridge, a new barbed wire fence had been erected around the spring. A company notice hung from one post. "Property of the Dry Creek Land Company. Trespassers will be prosecuted." Nearly 70 cattle crowded outside the wire, restless from thirst. Silas had not waited for the March hearing. Gideon pulled a fence tool from his saddlebag. "If you cut that wire," Eliza said, "Vale will charge you with destroying company property." "It is my property." "I know, but Silas wants you angry. My cattle need water, and we will give it to them." She opened the old ranch map they had brought from the cabin and pointed to a narrow contour running south of the disputed spring. "This drainage channel crosses your uncontested acreage. If we deepen it here and break the frozen bank above it, we can divert part of the spring runoff beneath the fence. It will take hours. Then we should begin." They worked until their hands blistered. Gideon broke the frozen soil with a pickaxe, while Eliza cleared mud and stones with a shovel. As dusk approached, a narrow stream entered the old drainage channel and spread into the cattle trough below. The first animals pushed forward to drink. Gideon leaned on the pickaxe, exhausted and mud-covered. Eliza stood beside him, her dress ruined to the knees. Silas had expected rage. Instead, Gideon and Eliza had answered him with labor, planning, and enough water to keep the herd alive. But when they returned to the cabin, the door stood open. The iron box had been forced apart. Every original receipt was gone. Gideon searched the cabin twice. The thief had ignored his rifle, the money beneath the flour tin, and the silver watch that had belonged to his father. Only the original loan receipts and county filing slip were missing. "This was Silas," he said, "or someone working for him. I should have left Owen's copy with Mrs. Cobb. You should not blame yourself for another man's crime." Gideon turned toward her. "He came here because of what we found. If we continue, he will come after you next. He already has. That letter from Mrs. Harrow was meant to damage your name. Breaking into an empty cabin is different. You are right. This time he damaged a lock." "Eliza." The force of her name stopped her. Gideon stood beside the broken iron box, his hands closed tightly at his sides. "You could have been here." She finally understood that his anger was fear, wearing heavier boots. "But I was not." "That does not make the thought easier." "What are you asking me to do?" He looked away. "Go to Dry Creek. Stay with Mrs. Cobb until the hearing." "And leave you here alone?" "I have managed alone before." "That is not an answer." "It is the only safe choice." "For whom?" "For you." Eliza crossed the room until only the table separated them. "When I arrived, you respected my right to choose whether I entered the barn. You respected it, even when you believed I was making a mistake. This is not a barn. No, this is more dangerous, and therefore my choice matters more." Gideon pressed both hands against the table. "If anything happens to you because of my land, it is no longer only about your land." His eyes lifted to hers. "Silas used false papers against you," she continued. "Mrs. Harrow used a false accusation against me. Men like them win because they convince each person that injustice is a private burden to be carried quietly. And if staying costs you more than you expect, then I will pay the cost I chose. The room remained still around them. At last, Gideon nodded. I do not want you to go, he said. It was the first time he had told her what he wanted, rather than what he believed should happen. Eliza's voice softened. Then do not ask me. I won't. The following morning, they reported the burglary to Sheriff Jonah Mercer. Unlike Deputy Rusk, Mercer listened carefully and examined the cabin himself. He found 2 sets of tracks near the northern window. One belonged to a man wearing a boot with a triangular patch on the left heel. The other came from a narrow company wagon. The Dry Creek Land Company owns 4 wagons, Mercer said. That does not prove which one was here. But it proves the thief did not arrive on foot, Eliza replied. Mercer nodded, and he knew exactly what to take. Eliza showed him the copies she had made before the burglary. Each receipt was recorded in her ledger with its date, amount, stamp, and Amos Bell's initials. These are accurate, Gideon said. I believe they may be, Mercer answered, but a court will prefer originals. Owen Price has Amos's final balance sheet. That will help. So will Mrs. Cobb's testimony. What about the red ledger? Gideon asked. If Owen swears that Vale took it, I can request a search order. But Commissioner Vale will challenge my authority. We need the circuit judge. When does he arrive? March 3rd. That is 4 days after Silas's deadline. Mercer's expression was grim. Then you must keep the cattle alive and avoid giving Vale a reason to arrest you until the judge arrives. Before leaving, the sheriff collected a broken splinter from the iron box and the impressions of both sets of tracks. It was not enough to expose Silas, but it was the beginning of another chain. That afternoon, Eliza moved every remaining paper into 3 separate bundles. One went to Mrs. Cobb. Owen kept the original balance sheet. Eliza retained the deed, the disputed agreement, and her complete accounting ledger. You expected someone to steal the papers, Gideon said. I expected someone to try. Where will you hide the ledger? She took the wooden box containing Ruth's carved animals from the shelf. Gideon became still. No one searching for financial records would look inside this, she said. But I will use another place if you prefer. He considered the painted bird on the lid, then handed the box to her. I trust you. Eliza placed the ledger beneath the carved animals. The little horse rested on top, its repaired legs still wrapped with her blue ribbon. Near sunset, Silas rode to the ranch again. This time, he came alone and stopped outside the gate. I would like to speak with Miss Ward, he called. Gideon remained beside her. Speak. Silas removed an envelope from his coat. There is enough money here for a railway ticket to Ohio, and $50 besides. More than you could earn in a year keeping another man's books. What do you want in return? Eliza asked. Leave tonight. Sign a statement saying Mr. Hale instructed you to alter his accounts. I will make certain Mrs. Harrow withdraws her complaint. That final promise revealed more than Silas intended. You have spoken directly with Mrs. Harrow, Eliza said. His pause was brief but visible. She wants her property returned. She wants the truth buried. Silas's expression hardened. Truth is a word used by people who cannot afford evidence. Eliza took the envelope. Gideon looked at her, but he did not interfere. She opened it, removed the money, and counted it. $50 exactly. Then she recorded the serial numbers in her ledger and handed the bills back. Thank you, she said. You have just offered payment in exchange for false testimony. Sheriff Mercer may find that interesting. Silas snatched the money from her hand. You believe Hale will protect you? He asked. When this is finished, he will have no ranch, no cattle, and no use for a housekeeper who brought ruin to his door. Gideon stepped to the gate. She did not bring ruin here, he said. She found it waiting and gave it a name. For one moment, Silas looked as though he might reach for the pistol beneath his coat. Then he saw Gideon's face and reconsidered. He mounted his horse. At sunrise on March 1st, my men will take possession of the northern pasture, he said. Anyone who interferes will be arrested. After he rode away, Eliza remained beside the gate. You let me take the envelope, she said. It was your answer to give. And if I had accepted? Gideon's jaw tightened. I would have saddled the mare for you. Would you have tried to stop me? No. The answer hurt and comforted her at the same time. But I would have asked you to write, he added. Eliza looked at him. Gideon's gaze stayed on the empty trail. When Ruth left, I let pride turn one goodbye into 8 years, he said. I will not make that mistake twice. She reached for his hand. It was the first time either of them had touched the other without necessity. His fingers closed around hers carefully, as though trust were something alive that could be frightened away. They stood together until the cold forced them inside. At dawn the next morning, 6 company riders appeared on the northern ridge. Behind them came Commissioner Vale, Deputy Rusk, and an empty cattle wagon. Silas Bell carried a court order bearing Vale's signature. Gideon had until sunset to surrender the pasture, or be taken to jail. Commissioner Vale read the possession order from horseback. The document granted the Dry Creek Land Company temporary control of the northern pasture until Gideon paid the disputed debt or a territorial judge ruled otherwise. Beneath Vale's signature appeared Deputy Rusk's mark authorizing enforcement. Sheriff Mercer was not present. You have until sunset to remove your cattle, Vale said. After that, they will be considered unlawfully grazed on company property. You cannot issue an impartial order in favor of a company you own, Eliza replied. Vale looked down at her. My investments are not relevant to my public duties. They are the reason you are abusing them. Deputy Rusk rested one hand near his pistol. Gideon stepped between him and Eliza. We will move the cattle, Gideon said. She turned toward him. Gideon, not because the order is lawful, because 70 animals should not suffer while men argue over paper. Silas smiled from behind Vale. A wise decision. I have not finished. Gideon pointed toward the company fence. Your men remain outside the herd. Owen and I will move the cattle to the southern field. If any rider attempts to drive them toward your wagons, I will consider it theft. You are in no position to set terms, Vale said. Then arrest me. The challenge quieted everyone on the ridge. Vale hesitated. He had expected Gideon to shout, draw a weapon, or tear down the fence, something that could be described later as violence. Calm resistance was harder to use. Silas rode closer. Sign a transfer of the pasture, he said, and this ends today. No. Then surrender the herd as payment. No. You cannot save both. Gideon glanced at Eliza. Yes, he said. I can. He unbuckled his gun belt and handed it to her. Then he walked toward Deputy Rusk with his hands visible. If you intend to enforce Vale's order through arrest, take me. But the cattle remain under Miss Ward's management until a judge rules. Eliza stared at him. The ranch had defined Gideon's life for 8 years. Every fence, barn beam, and winter store bore the evidence of his labor. Yet he had just placed it all in her hands before half the county. Deputy Rusk took out his handcuffs. Silas's confidence returned. A woman accused of theft cannot manage disputed property. She has my written authority, Gideon said. He removed a folded paper from his coat and passed it to Eliza. He had prepared it the previous night. The document authorized her to manage the livestock, accounts, and daily operations of Hale Ranch during his absence. Mrs. Cobb had witnessed his signature. You planned this, Eliza whispered. I considered the possibility. You should have told me. You might have argued. I am arguing now. A faint smile touched his face. Then nothing has been lost. Rusk closed the handcuffs around Gideon's wrists. Eliza stepped closer. I will get you out. I know. There was no doubt in his voice. The company riders escorted Gideon toward Dry Creek. Silas remained long enough to order 2 men to watch the disputed pasture. Eliza waited until the riders disappeared beyond the bridge. Then she turned to Owen. We have 7 hours before sunset. Moving 70 cattle across frozen ground required more than determination. Several cows were heavy with calves, the southern field contained little shelter, and the herd resisted leaving the spring they had used for years. Eliza organized the work. Owen rode the eastern flank. 2 neighboring ranchers, Samuel Ortiz and Ben Coffey, came after seeing the company riders on the road. Neither wanted Silas Bell to discover that fraud could acquire land more cheaply than purchase. They moved the herd in groups of 15. Eliza rode Gideon's smaller mare at the rear, guiding stragglers away from the creek. Whenever uncertainty threatened her, she remembered his lessons. Do not fight the animal's weight. Give it a clear path, and let pressure come from the direction you did not want it to go. By dusk, all 70 cattle stood within the southern pasture. Silas's men counted them twice and found no excuse to interfere. Then the rain began. It fell warm and hard across the frozen valley, loosening snow from the slopes. Water rushed toward the northern spring and struck the company's new fence. Cut brush and broken branches gathered against the wire until it formed a dam. Owen rode to the cabin. "If that fence holds," he said, "the water will turn south. It will flood the calving barn." Eliza opened Gideon's map. The same drainage channel they had deepened could carry the runoff, but only if someone opened it above the company fence. That point lay within the disputed pasture. Silas's watchers refused permission. "Then the barn floods," one said. "Not our concern." Eliza looked toward the cattle. The red heifer they had saved was inside that barn with her calf. She took Gideon's fence tool from the wagon. "You will be arrested," Owen warned. "Only if we survive long enough to attend the hearing." They rode into the northern pasture. One company man reached for Eliza's reins. Owen moved his horse between them. "She has written authority to protect the livestock," he said. "Not on company land." "It is Gideon Hale's land," Eliza replied. "You may explain the difference to the judge." She dismounted beside the blocked channel. Rain had turned the ground into black mud. Water rose around her boots as she cut the lowest wire and pulled branches free. The pressure released all at once. A wall of icy runoff knocked her from her feet. Owen caught her coat, but the current dragged both of them toward the lower bank. Eliza seized a fence post with one hand. With the other, she held the cutting tool above the water. "Cut the second wire," she shouted. Owen reached it and severed the strand. The trapped water burst through the opening and entered the drainage channel. It rushed south of the ridge, past the barn, and down toward the creek. The buildings remained dry. By the time Eliza returned to the cabin, she was soaked, bruised, and shaking from cold. On the table stood the 2 blue cups. She filled one with coffee and left the other empty. The sight of it hurt more than she expected, but there was no time to sit with the feeling. Eliza changed clothes, retrieved the ledger from Ruth's wooden box, and rode through the rain to Dry Creek. She reached the telegraph office 10 minutes before closing. Her message to Territorial Circuit Judge Edwin Marshall contained 83 words. She listed the missing county pages, the conflicting company seals, Vale's financial interest, Owen's balance sheet, the forced seizure, and Gideon's arrest. It cost nearly all her remaining wages. The operator sent it at 8 that evening. At 10, the reply arrived. "Judge Marshall will reach Dry Creek tomorrow at 3. Preserve all records and witnesses. No livestock to be removed before hearing." Eliza carried the telegram directly to Sheriff Mercer. He read it, put on his coat, and took his rifle from the wall. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To inform Silas Bell that the territory has taken an interest in his bookkeeping." "And Gideon?" Mercer unlocked the cell door. Gideon stepped into the office, his gaze finding Eliza immediately. He saw her wet hair, mud-stained dress, and bruised hands. "What happened?" "I protected your future," she said. He crossed the room and stopped before her. "No," he answered quietly. "You protected ours." Judge Edwin Marshall arrived in Dry Creek at 3 o'clock precisely. By 3:30, the courthouse was full. Ranchers stood along the walls. Miners crowded near the rear windows. Mrs. Pomeroy occupied the front bench with the solemn expression of a woman attending both a legal proceeding and the finest piece of gossip the territory had provided all winter. Judge Marshall was a narrow man with tired eyes and no patience for ceremony. He removed his wet coat, reviewed Eliza's telegram, and ordered the hearing to begin. Silas Bell sat beside Commissioner Vale. An attorney from Helena occupied the chair between them. Gideon and Eliza sat at the opposite table with Mrs. Cobb and Owen Price. Sheriff Mercer was absent. Before entering the courtroom, Judge Marshall had signed a warrant authorizing him to search Vale's office and the Dry Creek Land Company building. Eliza placed her ledger on the table. Ruth's small wooden horse rested inside her pocket, its damaged leg still bound with the blue ribbon. She had brought it without fully understanding why. Perhaps she needed evidence that a broken thing could remain useful if someone cared enough to repair it. Commissioner Vale spoke first. He claimed Gideon had defaulted on an $800 loan secured by the northern pasture. He described his possession order as a necessary protection of company property and insisted his shares in the company had not influenced his judgment. Judge Marshall looked over his spectacles. How many shares? Vale hesitated. 20. And how much would those shares increase in value if Bell's company acquired access to the coal fields west of Hale Ranch? Vale's attorney objected. The judge ignored him. Silas presented the disputed agreement. Its copied signature appeared convincing, and its language clearly pledged the northern pasture. Then Eliza placed the 2-star receipts and Silas's 3-star certification before the court. This document claims it was certified in August, she said, but the seal stamped upon it did not exist until November, after Amos Bell's death. Silas leaned back in his chair. A clerical mistake. Then why was the county filing page removed? Judge Marshall asked. I know nothing about county records. Mrs. Cobb testified next. She confirmed that Gideon's original loan had been recorded as $400 and secured by 40 cattle. She also testified that Commissioner Vale had inspected the filing volume twice after Amos Bell's death. Vale claimed he did not remember doing so. Mrs. Cobb produced the access register bearing his signature. A murmur moved through the courtroom. Owen Price took the witness chair. His hands trembled at first, but his voice became steadier as he described Amos's red ledger and the false agreements prepared by Silas. He unfolded the final balance sheet. Mr. Bell wrote this 2 days before he died, Owen said. I watched him calculate every figure. Silas's attorney stood. Mr. Price was dismissed from the company, was he not? Yes. For carelessness? For refusing to copy a loan amount I knew was false. Yet you waited months before making this accusation. I was afraid. The attorney smiled as though fear made the testimony worthless. Owen looked toward Eliza. Then he faced the judge again. I am still afraid, he said. I am telling the truth anyway. Judge Marshall accepted the balance sheet. Next came Eliza's accounting ledger. She explained the altered invoices, duplicate charges, missing supplies, and each payment made by Gideon. Silas's attorney questioned her right to inspect the records and then turned to the accusation from Mrs. Harrow. Were you not dismissed for theft? I was accused of theft. Is there a difference? There is to an innocent person. Several people in the room shifted. The attorney lifted Mrs. Harrow's letter. Why should this court trust records prepared by a woman whose former employer calls her dishonest? Before Eliza could answer, Gideon stood. Judge Marshall told him to sit down. With respect, Your Honor, that question concerns my accounts and my decision to employ Miss Ward. Then answer briefly. Gideon faced the attorney. I trusted Amos Bell because he had a respected name, he said. That trust nearly cost me my ranch. I trusted Eliza Ward because I watched what she did when no one expected anything from her. That is sentiment, Mr. Hale. No, it is evidence of character. The attorney began to interrupt, but Gideon continued. She could have taken my money, my deed, or Silas Bell's offer. Instead, she saved my cattle, preserved my records, and spent her final wages bringing this matter before an honest judge. His voice remained calm. If this court tells me I must choose between my land and her word, then I choose her word. Land can be rebuilt. Trust like hers cannot. Eliza stared at him. He had once built his entire life around never trusting another person with his future. Now he was willing to stake that future upon her name before the whole town. Judge Marshall turned toward Silas. Did you offer Miss Ward money for testimony? No. Eliza opened her ledger and read the serial numbers of the bills. She also presented the written account she had made immediately after the offer. You have only her word, Silas said. No, came a voice from the rear. Samuel Ortiz stood beside the door. I was repairing a wagon near Hale's Gate. I heard enough. Ben Coffey stood beside him. So did I. They had arrived that afternoon to testify about the illegal fence and the flooded spring. Neither had told Eliza they had witnessed Silas's offer. Judge Marshall ordered their statements taken. The hearing continued for another hour. Then the courthouse doors opened. Sheriff Mercer entered carrying a red leather ledger beneath one arm and Gideon's stolen receipts in an evidence sack. The room erupted. Judge Marshall struck the desk with his gavel. Where were these found? He asked. The ledger was locked inside Commissioner Vale's private filing cabinet, Mercer said. The receipts were beneath the floorboards of Silas Bell's office. Vale rose so quickly that his chair fell backward. That search was unlawful. I signed the warrant, Judge Marshall said. Sit down. Mercer placed another item on the table, a company wagon log showing that one wagon had been assigned to Silas's foreman on the night Gideon's cabin was robbed. The foreman's left boot bore a triangular leather patch. Faced with the tracks, the wagon record, and a charge of burglary, the man had given Mercer a signed statement identifying Silas as the person who ordered him to steal the receipts. There was no single miraculous piece of evidence. There was the county index, Amos's balance sheet, the mismatched seals, Owen's testimony, Eliza's accounts, the witnesses to the bribe, the tracks, the wagon log, the stolen receipts, and finally the red ledger Vale had claimed not to possess. Together, they left no room for Silas's lie to breathe. Judge Marshall invalidated the possession order and confirmed Gideon's ownership of the northern pasture. He ordered the company fence removed and referred Silas Bell, Commissioner Vale, Deputy Rusk, and the foreman to the territorial prosecutor on charges including fraud, destruction of public records, bribery, and burglary. Silas did not reach for his gun. He simply sat very still while Sheriff Mercer placed him under arrest. When the courtroom emptied, Gideon remained beside the table. Eliza closed her ledger. "You would truly have chosen my word over the ranch?" she asked. "I already did. That would have been extremely foolish." "Yes." "You do not usually behave foolishly." "No." She looked at him. "Why now?" Gideon reached into his coat and placed the cabin key beside her ledger. "Because the ranch stopped being my future the night you walked through my gate," he said. "It became ours when you decided to stay." They returned to the ranch after dark. The company fence had already been cut down by order of Judge Marshall. Water flowed freely from the northern spring, and the cattle stood peacefully beneath a sky cleared by wind. Inside the cabin, Gideon built the fire, while Eliza placed Ruth's wooden box back upon the shelf. Neither spoke about what had happened in the courtroom. There were too many words waiting, and both of them understood that choosing the wrong first one might allow the others to hide behind it. Eliza prepared coffee. She poured it into the two blue enamel cups and carried them to the table. Gideon sat opposite her, but instead of taking his cup, he placed the cabin key between them. "You said the ranch became ours," Eliza began. "Yes." "What does that mean?" "It means I want you to stay." "As your bookkeeper?" "No." "As the woman who saved your land?" "No." "Then you will have to be more precise." Gideon looked down at his hands. He could confront an armed rider without hesitation, but a quiet woman asking for honesty presented an altogether more dangerous frontier. "When you first came through my gate," he said, "I believed I was giving you shelter for one night. Then you stayed long enough for me to understand how little of my life I had truly been living." Eliza remained silent. "You put a second cup on my table. You argued with me when I treated concern as authority. You trusted me enough to tell me the truth about Mrs. Harrow, and you demanded that I trust you with the truth about my land." He lifted his eyes to hers. "You did not make this cabin less quiet. You made the quiet mean something different." Her fingers tightened around the warm cup. "I have spent 8 years believing that if I needed no one could leave me," Gideon continued. "All I accomplished was leaving first, every day, before anyone had the chance. And now? Now I know that protecting myself from loss also protected me from having anything worth losing." He reached across the table but stopped before touching her hand. "Eliza, I do not want gratitude, obligation, or payment for the night you arrived. I want your choice. I want you beside me when the cattle are born, when the accounts refuse to balance, when the bridge washes out again, which it undoubtedly will because you continue looking at it suspiciously. It remains a questionable structure." "I expected you to say that." The smallest smile passed between them. Then Gideon became serious again. "I want to build a room where you can work. I want your name on every ranch account and your voice in every decision. I want to send the letters I should have sent to Ruth. And if you are willing, I want to become your husband." Eliza looked at the key lying between them. Her entire life, security had been something another person could withdraw. An employer could dismiss her, A wealthy family could destroy her name, and a hotel keeper could close a door because 43 cents was not enough. Gideon was not offering her permission to remain. He was asking her to decide what their future would become. "I will not stop working," she said. "I would not dare ask. I want my own income. You should have it. And if your accounts become disorderly again, I will take whatever action I consider necessary." "I fear that more than Silas Bell." She placed her hand over his. "Yes," she said, "I will stay." Gideon closed his fingers around hers. For a moment, neither moved. Then he came around the table and stood before her. He touched her cheek carefully, giving her every opportunity to turn away. She did not. Their first kiss was quiet and certain, without urgency or spectacle. It felt less like the beginning of something unknown than the recognition of something they had built together every day since the storm. When they separated, Eliza rested her forehead against his chest. "You gave me your only bed," she said. "You were freezing. You gave me your land records. You understood them. You gave me the cabin key. You kept returning." She looked up at him. "You are still difficult to praise. I have other qualities. So I have noticed." They married 6 weeks later, beneath the first green leaves of spring. Mrs. Cobb served as Eliza's witness. Sheriff Mercer stood beside Gideon. Owen Price arrived early and complained about it, thereby keeping the only promise he had made regarding mournings. Samuel Ortiz repaired the courthouse steps for the occasion. Mrs. Pomeroy supplied the wedding supper and later claimed she had known how the story would end from the moment Eliza entered her hotel with 43 cents. No one believed her, but the food was excellent, so the matter went unchallenged. Judge Marshall's investigation continued through the summer. Silas Bell and Commissioner Vale were convicted of fraud, bribery, and destruction of public records. The stolen loan receipts and Amos Bell's red ledger restored the accounts of 9 ranching families. The Dry Creek Land Company was reorganized under new management and ordered to compensate the landowners it had overcharged. Gideon paid the true remaining balance of $157.80 from the sale of his spring calves. Eliza insisted upon receiving every receipt. 2 months after the hearing, Sheriff Mercer brought her a telegram from Ohio. The authorities had traced the Harrow brooch to a pawn shop. Mrs. Harrow's nephew had sold it 3 days after Eliza's dismissal. Faced with the shopkeeper's record and his own signature, he confessed. Mrs. Harrow sent Eliza a formal apology. Eliza read it once and placed it in the fire. "Do you not want to keep it?" Gideon asked. "I already have what I wanted." "What is that?" "My name." No apology could return the weeks she had spent doubting whether truth possessed any power. But she had reclaimed her reputation through her own persistence, and she no longer required Mrs. Harrow's letter to prove who she was. That same evening, Gideon wrote to Ruth. Eliza sat beside him while he struggled through 4 different beginnings. In the end, his letter contained no explanations. "I was wrong. I am sorry. I have missed you for 8 years. If you are willing, I would like to know your life again." Ruth answered, before summer ended. She visited the ranch that autumn with her husband and 2 young daughters. Gideon met her at the gate carrying the small wooden horse she had carved as a child. When Ruth saw the blue ribbon around its repaired leg, she began to cry. Gideon apologized before pride could interfere. Ruth forgave him before fear could answer for her. Eliza stood back and allowed brother and sister to find their way toward each other. Later, Ruth's youngest daughter carried the wooden horse everywhere, though one leg remained slightly crooked. In the years that followed, Hale Ranch became one of the most dependable cattle operations in the valley. Gideon managed the land and livestock. Eliza kept the accounts, negotiated contracts, and opened a small office in Dry Creek where ranchers could bring documents they did not understand. She never allowed power to hide behind complicated language when plain words could expose it. Owen eventually became their foreman. He still complained before sunrise, but always arrived before it. Gideon and Eliza raised 2 children in an expanded cabin that never again felt arranged for one person. They taught both children to ride, calculate interest, repair fences, and distinguish protection from control. Whenever the creek damaged the bridge, Gideon rebuilt it. Whenever he declared it sound, Eliza inspected it suspiciously. They grew old at the same table where their arrangement had begun. The blue enamel cups acquired scratches, dents, and chips along their rims, but every morning they remained together upon the shelf. One was never placed behind the other again. Years earlier, Gideon had given a freezing stranger his only bed because leaving her outside would have been cruel. By spring, he had trusted her with his cattle, his land, his family, and every uncertain year still waiting ahead. And Eliza, who once possessed only 43 cents and a name someone else had tried to destroy, finally found a home no one could take from her. Not because it had been given to her, because she had helped build it.